Thursday, January 24. The significance of Pentecost. In the outpouring of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, Acts 2, verses 1 to 4, confirms one of the most decisive events in the history of the plan of salvation, the inauguration of Christ into his post-Calvary ministry as High Priest and King in the heavenly sanctuary. Let's read that, Acts 2, verses 1 to 4. When the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And also we'll compare that with Acts chapter 1, verses 4 to 8. And being assembled together with them, he commanded them not to depart from Jerusalem, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which, he said, you have heard from me. For John truly baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel? And he said to them, It is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. And Acts chapter 2, verse 33. Therefore, being exalted to the right hand of God, and having received from the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he poured out this which you now see and hear. Through his high priestly ministry at the right hand of the Father, as expressed in Revelation 5, verses 6 and 7, Christ is able to carry out the plan of salvation to its ultimate realization. Revelation 5, beginning at verse 6, And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne, and of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, stood a Lamb as though he had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. Christ is able to carry out the plan of salvation to its ultimate realization. As our mediator in the heavenly sanctuary, Jesus works to save us. Through him, believers may have free access to God and receive forgiveness for their sins. Question. Read Acts chapter 3, verses 32 to 36, along with John 7:39. What hope and encouragement did you find in the fact that Jesus stands in heaven as our high priest and king? First of all, Acts chapter 2, beginning at verse 32. This Jesus God has raised up, of which we are all witnesses. Therefore, being exalted to the right hand of God, and having received from the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he poured out this which you now see and hear. For David did not ascend into the heavens, but he says himself, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand, till I make your enemies your footstool. Therefore, let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. And John 7, verse 39. But this he spoke concerning the Spirit, whom those believing in him would receive, for the Holy Spirit was not yet given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. The exaltation of Christ in the heavenly sanctuary was followed by the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the disciples. Revelation 5:6 mentions the 7 spirits that are sent out into all the earth. As we saw in an earlier lesson, the 7 spirits denote the fullness of the activity of the Holy Spirit in the world. At Christ's enthronement, the Spirit is sent to the church. This sending of the Holy Spirit is one of Christ's first acts as our high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. The outpouring of the Holy Spirit meant that Jesus had appeared before the Father and that God had accepted his sacrifice on behalf of humanity. From the Acts of the Apostles, page 38 and 39, we read, Christ's ascension to heaven was the signal that his followers were to receive the promised blessing. When Christ passed within the heavenly gates, he was enthroned amidst the adoration of the angels. As soon as this ceremony was completed, the Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples in rich currents, and Christ was indeed glorified, even with the glory which he had with the Father from all eternity. The Pentecostal outpouring was heaven's communication that the Redeemer's inauguration was accomplished. According to his promise, he had sent the Holy Spirit from heaven to his followers as a token that he had, as priest and king, received all authority in heaven and on earth, and was the anointed one over his people. So, to finish today, read Hebrews 4:16 and Hebrews 8:1. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And Hebrews 8:1, now this is the main point of the things we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. What hope and encouragement do you find in the assurance that Jesus, as priest and king, has received all authority in heaven and on earth? How does believing this truth help you deal with everyday situations in your life and with the uncertainty of the future?